What's going on, everyone? Thank you for coming to watch. I've got guys an update on a big potential for some tropical development in the Atlantic. We've been talking about a pretty concerning tropical wave in the past few days, and this tropical wave is really showing some signs of life. We're talking about how it has a pretty high potential to develop throughout the next 7 days. Right, I've got all the details coming right up. Right, so thank you for joining me here on this Thursday afternoon. We've got lots to talk about in this video as we're going to be talking about the latest information that we just got from the models last night for this tropical wave that we've been talking about for the past few days. All right, we've got some really funky model runs that just came out, especially last night with the OZ models. The European model, the Canadian GFS, all of them have been really weird. They're all trying to figure out what's going to happen with this storm, where it's going to go, and they're all struggling to figure that out. And we have no model agreement at this point. So I've got all the details coming right up. All right, so take a look here at your current satellite loop. As you can see, we've got a lot going on in the Atlantic. So we'll start out here just taking a look in the North Atlantic. This dust actually has changed direction. So we saw this big plume of dust kind of go like here, and then it kind of went up this way. And so now we have all this dust kind of hung up here. All right, this is not going to bother what soon could be Tropical Storm Debby. This is not going to bother Debby at all, so Debby doesn't really need to worry about this. And so, as you can see, this dust is pretty thick, so it's actually going to help block just any storm from getting into the north central Atlantic, because we also have the high pressure ridge that always builds up here this time around. And so, that's why we're probably going to see storms become steered in this direction, which can be a problem because that brings storms a little bit closer to land. But what we've got now with our tropical wave, this is it here. It's much easier to locate than, let's say, a few days ago, because we're seeing a ton more convection start to pop off in and around the storm. All right, and we just got a lot of showers, thunderstorm activity. We did just get a Hurricane Hunter's mission that went into the storm, and they found winds that were or just conditions that favored the storm to no longer be a, I guess, tropical wave, but you could say it's now an invest. All right, so we are now investigating this storm. This is no longer just a tropical wave. This is an invest. So we officially can say that people are all watching the storm and investigating it. All right. So what's behind it? We'll talk about this in later updates because we need to focus on this storm. But look, we've got another tropical wave. We actually have two, or you could say we have three. All right. This one's minor, but we do have one that's kind of staying south of all this super dry and dusty air. And then we've got more of a robust looking tropical wave. All right, it's producing some shower and thunderstorm activity, and they're all moving over through the Atlantic. We haven't seen any signs of tropical activity at the GFS or any of the models have picked up on, but it's just something to watch out in the future because we have three tropical waves, and with the environment that they could be entering, with just these incredibly warm SSTs, we could honestly see all of them have at least a decent shot at trying to do something in the Atlantic. So obviously, way too far to talk about that, and we also have to keep our eyes on our main tropical wave, which we will head over to the National Hurricane Center's outlook, and you can see it now has a high 70% chance of tropical development throughout the next 7 days. All right, so the last time we looked at this, I think it was a few days ago, might have been yesterday, I can't even remember, but this was an orange X that you saw here in the last time we talked about this. All right, now it's up to a high red. I guess if you want to call it a code red. But we have a high risk of development throughout the next 7 days. It's a high 70% chance. I do expect this number to go up. All right, unless we get a major change in the forecast, and obviously I'll have model guidance to back me up on that. So we're pretty good on kind of figuring out how strong the storm may get. There's a lot of question marks with that, but we're pretty clear on the fact that this is most likely going to be developing into a tropical depression, and that's why we have the high 70% chance of development. Notice how we now have a 30% chance of development through the next 48 hours. This will not develop in the next 48 hours, don't worry. But that number has gone up because we've seen a lot of more convection that's started to pop off in and around the storm, like I mentioned earlier. So that's why just the threat for tropical development throughout the next 48 hours and 7 days has all just increased. All right, but you can see that we actually have seen a shift further south. This is right over the Dominican Republic and Hispaniola. All right, this is no longer going to what seems to be going through the Bahamas. This is going to go probably south of the Bahamas. Still a lot of showers and thunderstorm activity around the storm, which does include the Bahamas, but the core of it, the center, if there is a center, if you want to consider the storm to have a center, it will. What it seems like what's going to happen is just going to try to move towards Cuba. And then we really don't know what's going to happen after that, because if you take a look at all the recent National Hurricane Center forecasts, they've pretty much went from looking like this to now looking like this. So we've seen a complete change in direction from the National Hurricane Center. So even they really don't know exactly what's going to happen with this storm. But as of right now, Florida, the entire state of Florida, pretty much is included in this area of interest with that high 70% chance of development. This includes a lot of Cuba, mainly central and western Cuba, and then you've got the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico, pretty much, or I guess the eastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico included in this area of interest. So we'll continue to watch this. I do expect, once again, a lot of changes with this, not only in just the chances of development, but also with the actual direction and shape of this cone here. All right. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a pretty major update that we've got. I mean, to be honest with you guys, I did not expect this to get up to a high risk as soon as the storm actually was noticed. All right, but here we are. We have a high risk of development throughout the next 7 days. All right, so we're gonna head over to the GFS. We're gonna take a look at the GFS, the European model, the Canadian model, just like we have been. All right, we're gonna look at the GFS OZ, 6Z, and 12Z because it's caught onto a pretty funky pattern, or I guess model trend that we really need to watch. And I think if other models start to latch onto this, which we already do have some signs that they may be trying to do that, but if that actually happens, then this could be a pretty bad scenario for a lot of people. So we're actually going to start with the OZ run. So what the OZ run was, the run that came out at around midnight this morning. All right, and so last night, and so this is the middle of the night of last night's run. And as you can see, you get that low that goes right through Cuba. So this is going right through the National Hurricane Center's path. All right, so this seems like a pretty good run of the GFS so far. And this is when things get funky. This is a 1,007 millibar low, which you could argue is a tropical depression. By the time we get to 2 a.m., which would be about Sunday, I believe. Yeah, so this is 2 a.m. Sunday, and we get into Sunday morning. We're waking up Sunday morning with a 1,005 millibar low. This is closing in on tropical storm status. I mean, 1,005 millibars, you're getting a strengthening tropical depression that seems like it's curving up and trying to do something with Florida. All right, and it's trying to mess around with Florida. And what happens next? Well, this intensifies pretty quickly, and we fast forward to Sunday night. This is Sunday night, Sunday evening, and Sunday night. And we now have a 995 millibar low, which is a pretty strong tropical storm. So at this point, this would be Tropical Storm Debby by Sunday night. Now, I don't want you guys to say that this is going to be Tropical Storm Debby right by Florida on Sunday night, all right? This is just one run on the GFS, but that's what it has. And, I mean, this is 96 hours out, so not too far out, but this is something that you could definitely see happening. This is a reasonable scenario because if you go back in the video, this is pretty much right in the center of the area of interest, the cone, if you would, of the National Hurricane Center, all right? So it's interesting to see that. But what happens after that? Well, we take this out to 2 in the morning on Monday, and this starts to strengthen even more. Get down to a 991 millibar low, so we're probably at this point closing in on Category 1 status. And this is going right up towards the Big Bend of Florida, maybe just to the west of there. And we fast forward to, we go into Monday afternoon, and this really explodes, and we get this down to a 978 millibar low. So we're going to switch over to the southeast. We go in for a closer look, and you can see we get this down to a 978 millibar low, and it impacts areas just to the west of the Big Bend of Florida, and it makes a technical landfall as a 971 millibar low. But notice how it slows down just before it makes landfall, and this is interesting. The GFS wants this thing to stall out over North Florida. All right, this wants it to stall out over North Florida at around a 970 millibar low, which is probably a Cat 2, maybe even towards a Cat 3 major hurricane. So this is a pretty aggressive run of the GFS, showing a very strong hurricane in North Florida stalling out. I mean, you can see we go like a whole day and a half with this storm pretty much on top of the northern coast of Florida, and then this strengthens even more because it's partially over waters, which is crazy because we know any hurricane or tropical system that gets on land, it always weakens out dramatically. But even though this one is halfway on land, you can see, I mean, the technical eye of this would be still offshore. It's still strengthened. All right, it's still strengthening. And this gets down to a 968 millibar low, which you could pretty much say that this is a category 3 major hurricane, and it comes back offshore. And what's going on here? You're probably thinking like, whoa, what happened with that? You know, why is this down to a 954 millibar low? Why did we go from having probably a high end tropical storm, maybe low end category 1 hurricane hitting Florida, to now a 970 millibar low hurricane just sitting over North Florida for a day or so, and then coming off land? And look at this, 950. I mean, that's incredible. All right. So what you just saw was the storm going up towards Florida, stalling out over North Florida, and then coming back over the Gulf of Mexico, which, by the way, has incredibly warm SSTs. And now this is down to a 954 millibar low. So you're talking about a high end Category 3 hurricane at this point. This is by 2 p.m. on Wednesday. So this is Wednesday afternoon. GFS, I mean, you're showing a pretty wonky scenario here. This is probably one of those worst case scenarios, I would say. And this wants to strengthen even more. And I mean, with the SSTs that we have out here, I mean, you could argue that this is definitely possible with this amount of strengthening. Now, please do not tell your uncle's brother's dog that this is going to be a 970 millibar low that's going to stall out over northern Florida, and then it's going to come back overseas, and it's going to do this. All right, this is not what's going to happen. I can almost guarantee you that. All right, and this is just one run of the GFS, probably the worst case scenario, but I'm going to show it to you guys anyways because what you can say is that this is a signal for a strong hurricane, potentially a major hurricane, and a signal for the potential uh track of the storm. Now, I seriously doubt that this is going to stall out over North Florida, come back overseas, and do all this. But I mean, this does show a potential general track of where the storm's going to go, and this kind of just strengthens even more, gets down to a 948 millibar low. This could honestly be a Category 4 hurricane at this point, and then just runs right into the Gulf Coast as a 961 millibar low. But I mean, that gets really strong for a moment, and it's still a really strong storm, probably a Category 3 hurricane, and then kind of just makes landfall. And this is still probably a tropical storm going up into Texarkana and into the Arkansas area, and then that guy kind of gets caught up in our pattern. All right, so we're gonna go back to the Western Atlantic, and we're gonna take a look at the 6Z run. All right, we just looked at the OZ run. You're probably thinking like, all right, it doesn't get crazier than that. That was absolutely insane. Well, it kind of does, and I'm gonna show you why. All right, so after what we just looked at, you saw the OZ run showing the pretty much same exact track as what the National Hurricane Center was showing, pretty much. You look at the 6Z, and the 6Z pretty much agrees completely with the OZ, pretty much showing the same exact kind of track here over sections of Cuba. All right, this is down to 1,010 millibar low, so probably a tropical depression at this point. All right, 1,010 millibar low, 54 hours out. So this is probably going to be around 8 a.m. Saturday. You're waking up on Saturday, and this is down to 1,004 millibar low as you get into Saturday night, and then here comes Sunday, and then we get into Sunday afternoon. All right, and the OZ, remember the OZ was still showing this pretty much at around here. All right, still has about a 990 millibar low, so there is still some agreement with that. And we do see the storm go right up to the same area near the Big Bend of Florida. All right, this is a 992 millibar low, probably a high-end tropical storm. Not yet quite a Category 1 hurricane, but still probably a high-end tropical storm. And this makes a technical landfall onto Florida. Now, unlike the OZ run, the 6Z run actually does not have this stalling out over North Florida, and it's a bunch weaker. So this is a more likely scenario. But it's gonna go downhill. All right, it's gonna get bad. All right, but this is a 996 millibar low, still a tropical storm moving through North Florida, kind of just like a regular tropical storm that you get in the hurricane season. All right, nothing too crazy, does its damage. All right, moves through the South Carolina and Georgia coastline, and we see what happens after that. Notice how this thing goes from going through North Florida, going through Georgia, kind of how Hurricane Idalia did last fall during hurricane season last year. Takes that same general path, but it comes offshore. And what happened here? All right, we're gonna look at the southeast. We're gonna zoom in here. What happens here? Well, it comes offshore and it rebounds. All right, it does a little rebound like a U-turn, and now it's a 988 millibar low, which is the strongest point it would ever be at. After going through all this land, it still comes offshore and manages to re-strengthen, and by 2 p.m. on Tuesday, we have a 988 millibar low, which is a Category 1 hurricane. And we have to see what this thing's going to do. And what happens after that? Well, we get through Tuesday, we go into Wednesday. This is still dropping. This is now down to a 980 millibar low as this is moving towards Florida. And it's kind of stalling out, too. This is moving very slowly as we get into Wednesday. And then we take this out to Wednesday afternoon, slowly but surely starting to see this go a little bit farther to the west, and this is going right back towards Florida. Pretty much the craziest track I've ever seen from any tropical disturbance. It moves through Cuba, goes up towards the Big Bend of Florida, goes to the coastline, and now it's coming back and it's trying to impact a different part of Florida, the other coastline of Florida. I mean, that's crazy. That's absolutely insane. So if you're hoping that you get missed by the storm, let's say if you're near like Tallahassee or I remind me what city's out here, but I know there's a major city out here in Florida. But let's say you're out here in northeast Florida, and you're like, all right, I just got spared, just got missed by that storm, and then it comes back, and you're like, what's going on? Well, it wants to get you. That's what it's gonna feel like. All right, and so please, once again, do not tell your family, your family's friends, just whatever, that this storm is going to do a complete U-turn and impact Florida. This is one run of the GFS. All right, and now we've seen how the GFS is just absolutely showing crazy scenarios that I can guarantee you are 99% sure that they will not happen. All right, but we're just gonna show this one anyways because we gotta look at the signal for this. But this is getting down to a 972 millibar low just off the coast of far northeastern Florida and southeastern Georgia. 972 millibar low, probably a high-end Category 2 hurricane, and then boom, this makes landfall as a 973 millibar low on northeastern Florida and far southeastern Georgia by 8 p.m. on Thursday or Wednesday. All right, this is 8 p.m. Wednesday, and then we get into Wednesday night, and then into Thursday morning. This kind of just drifts over to the same general area that the storm hit when it made its first initial landfall as a 984 millibar, still Category 1 hurricane, gets caught up in that pattern, and look what it's doing. It's stalling out over North Florida. And you're probably thinking, all right, that's enough. Is it going to go over waters again? Well, thankfully, the GFS isn't crazy enough to do that, and it actually keeps us over land, but it stalls out over North Florida, so it's going to... This is just insane, guys. This is maybe the wildest run of the GFS I've ever seen for a potential hurricane or whatever. All right, but this continues just to move. It continues to just spin around North Florida, and it's there for a while. It's there for what is that? That's 24 hours. It's there for almost 40 hours. This thing could stall out over North Florida for 2 days. I mean, this is so unlikely. You can see pretty much how this is almost impossible to happen. And then this kind of just slowly gets caught up in the pattern and just dissolves and kind of fizzles out. Just bring a lot of tropical moisture, tropical rainfall, and some thunderstorms out there to the southeast. But I'll play through this, and you can just see how wild this track of the storm is. I mean, it's a 986 millibar low going into Big Bend of Florida. All right, then it kind of just, does its thing, fizzles out, comes back on the waters, and then it comes back and does a U-turn, and then it stalls out. All right, but that is a pretty wild track, pretty wild scenario. All right, I don't think that's going to be a worst case scenario, unlike the other one we looked at. But here's the track of it. Definitely the wildest scenario that we're going to see from the GFS, and it makes an even sharper U-turn than that. It actually should do a track like this, but it really doesn't matter. It's just an absolutely insane run of the GFS. And then finally, we'll switch this back to the Western Atlantic, and we go over to the 12Z GFS. This is the afternoon run of the GFS, the lunchtime run. All right, here's a storm, and it's moving through Cuba, still doing the same exact thing like the 6Z and the OZ said. A little bit stronger this time, 1,009 millibars. I thought that said 1,006, but probably a tropical depression at this point. And here it goes, moves up towards Florida, 1,001 millibars, and we're almost at a tropical storm status. Could even be a tropical storm. 1,000 millibars here, just flat 1,000 as we get into Sunday morning. All right, and we're getting into Sunday, and we take this out into the rest of Sunday, and this kind of strengthens a little bit more. We get this down to a 992 millibar low, so that's probably a high-end tropical storm by Sunday night, and then we get into early Monday morning. This does the same thing that the 60 run of the GFS does, and you're probably thinking, oh gosh, are we going to see another U-turn? And we take a look, and this does come offshore. Yes, it does come offshore, and it's thinking about making that U-turn. So that could be 2 runs in a row that the GFS wants us to come offshore, re-strengthen, and almost do a U-turn. But thankfully, this actually shows a possible scenario of it moving offshore, which still, it's crazy that we could have a double tropical storm and maybe even a hurricane here. All right, but we take this to the eastern United States. We can get a look at this. This is a 975 millibar low, probably a Category 2, high-end Category 2 hurricane. And all of a sudden, you've got a monster hurricane just off the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And what is this going to do next? Well, it kind of just floats its way up and makes a landfall as the 976 millibar low right on the Outer Banks. Now, this would be really bad because you'd get storm surge with this, and I know the Outer Banks just absolutely gets battered by storm surge. You're going to get high winds with this, heavy rainfall. I'm not saying that this is certainly going to happen. I'm just saying, once again, one run of the GFS, all you can say from this is that this is a strong signal from the GFS that we could potentially get a strong hurricane somewhere in the southeast. All right. But this would be by Thursday afternoon at around 2 p.m. And this continues to just kind of move up through the Outer Banks. And then we get to Friday morning. This is early Friday morning. And this comes back offshore and it re-strengthens. And it gets down to a 986 millibar low. It weakens out actually after it moves back onshore. But then it re-strengthens, gets down to a sub 990 millibar low. And at this point, it's getting caught up in what looks to be a trough that's moving through the northeast, and it kind of just gets itself flung out to sea. And really, nobody out here in the northeast is feeling any impacts by this, so everyone's spared in the northeast from this trough. But people in Florida and all the way up the southeast coastline are not so lucky. But I think that this is a little bit more likely than what the OZs and the 60 run of the GFS show, but this is still a pretty wild scenario, getting a double landfall, getting one here on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But, I mean, yeah, you could get a landfall on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, but as a double landfall, I really doubt it. But at least this is a little bit of a better run of the GFS than its prior runs, all right? So that was a GFS model, and we look at the European model. All right, we're going to look at the OZ because every other run is 240 hours out, and that's what we need to look at. So we can't look at the 60 because it's only, I believe it's only 120 hours out. So we're just going to look at the OZ here. What does the European model show? I will say the European model does not do anything too aggressive in this run, and we see what happens. It's just this little blob of green, this blob of green right here. This is your tropical wave moving over Cuba. Pretty much the same exact thing that GFS and or just that all the runs of the GFS were showing, and this makes its way up into the Gulf Coast. And I mean, it's so hard to pick out from the European model. It's really not showing much. But this is it here. It's just a little blob of green, and I guess you could say this is moving through southern Florida and just bringing a lot of tropical rainfall, and it's not really showing any signs of development. And guys, I don't know what this is here, but the European model is showing something pretty weird with a lot of tropical moisture being pumped up into uh the Gulf Coast here, right around Florida, and it kind of just stalls out there, tries to get its act together and fails to do so, and it really just doesn't do much. It pops off a low at some points, but getting all the way to August 10th, we just have 1,009 millibar low kind of just spinning around out there in the Gulf, never really ends up doing much. So, you see how the GFS has been so aggressive with all of its runs, and the European model just does this. The European model has been struggling with this storm lately, so I don't think that this is the best run to look at from the European model. I think this is a little bit underdone. All right, but I mean, definitely keeping this pretty conservative from the European model. We'll obviously have to look at the 12Z once it comes out. Let's refresh, see if the 12Z comes out. Nope. All right, so we'll take a look at the 12Z in our next update, and we'll see what the European shows with that. But yeah, I mean, so far with the OZ, the GFS, the European model really just doesn't show much with this storm, which it is a possibility. I just really doubt it after seeing 3 runs in a row with the GFS showing a potentially major hurricane landfalling in the southeast. All right. So finally, we move over to the Canadian model. Now, what does the Canadian model show? I will tell you guys that before all of this happened, when we got the high risk for development, the Canadian model was strongly agreeing with the GFS on just the track and the future for the storm. And so we see what happens now. And you see this 1,009 millibar low going a little bit farther north than the models, going just to the north of Cuba, at least the center of the storm going north of Cuba. I doubt that's really going to affect the track of this storm much. But you see what happens. This gets down to a 1,006 millibar low as it's making its way through the Gulf of Mexico, or I guess into the Gulf of Mexico. And it's a 1,006 millibar, which you could argue is a tropical depression, so nothing too strong. And it makes a landfall a little bit further south than where the GFS and the European were showing. I guess the European didn't really show a landfall, but it makes a landfall kind of in the same general area of where Hurricane Ian made landfall. Now, I am not saying here, this does not mean that the storm is going to be the same strength as Hurricane Ian. Definitely not. But the Canadian model shows a similar landfall as Hurricane Ian, as a 1,006 millibar low in the same general area. And it kind of scrapes that area instead of making a landfall, and it just rides up the coastline, still maintaining its strength, gets down to 1,006 millibars. And you see these brighter colors here? I mean, that's probably more intense rainfall, so maybe some strengthening of the storm. But this makes a 1,006 millibar low landfall on the Big Bend of Florida, and actually strengthens just before it makes landfall as a 1,004 millibar low. Maybe, just maybe, I mean, probably not, but just maybe a tropical storm, a very weak tropical storm, but probably just a tropical depression. Brings a lot of tropical moisture up into the southeast, and then gets caught up in our pattern once again. And it actually comes offshore from going all the way up here through Florida. It kind of goes like this, goes up through Florida, and then goes all the way up through the southeast, and then kind of comes back offshore and does actually weaken back down to a 996 millibar low. And yes, I will show you guys out there in the northeast. And just in case we see any impacts from there, Canadian model may be showing some outer bands reaching into the coastline, but nothing too crazy other than some high waves and maybe some gusty conditions. But this makes its way offshore, and then this is really far out, and we can't really talk about what's going to happen after that. But I will show you guys in Nova Scotia just for the heck of it. All right, so we will look at, what are we going to look at here? Let's look at, hold on, guys. Let's look at the North American map. All right, we'll just look at this. But you can see that the storm kind of just, makes its way off the coast of the Northeast and then goes up towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And this is a subtropical storm at this point, but a strong one. 975 millibar low. This is going to bring subtropical impacts if this were to play out. And I keep saying it will, but according to this model run, it will. And obviously, can't say this model run is going to be 100% correct. But according to this model run, it makes a technical landfall as a subtropical storm as a 975 Millbar tropical subtropical storm in Newfoundland brings some just really high winds and probably some heavy rainfall. But that's about it. All right, so we take a look at model guidance, and now we go over to the ensemble runs. All right, so this is the European ensemble, and I just want to show you how ridiculously insane the models have been going. They honestly have no idea what this is going to do. They really don't. All right, this is the European model. These are 51 members that the European ensemble run takes up, and as you can see, we just have a ton of different tracks. We have a lot of tracks, or a few of them, going up here into like the Gulf Coast over towards Louisiana and Mississippi, maybe even Alabama. All right, here are those tracks that take this up into Florida, and notice how these are all weak. So that lines up with our latest OZ run uh, of the European model. But you do see a lot of tracks that take us up into Florida. None of them really look too concerning. A lot of like 96, 995, around 995 millibar lows that you see with those tracks. These are 51 members. And then finally, you get a lot of tracks that, they stay offshore, but you get a lot of tracks that can actually go through the Southwest Atlantic and stay offshore, but some of them could even scrape the East Coast here. So a lot of these tracks, a lot of these are the stronger ones, actually. The stronger tracks from the European ensemble take this a little bit closer to the East Coast rather than up towards Florida. And I really doubt that that's going to happen. I think that at this point, we pretty much know that the storm's going to go through Cuba, so we can pretty much eliminate that this region of the Atlantic is going to get hit. This part of the Atlantic is going to see impacts from the storm, if you want to put it that way. Um, I think that we could definitely see impacts up the East Coast after this storm goes through wherever it's going to go, because we still even don't know if it's going to go through, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, or even into Florida. But I think that afterwards, like we saw with the GFS, that we could see impacts down the line and maybe up the East Coast, but we just really have to wait and see. But the whole point of showing you guys was that there's a lot of different scenarios that all the members of the European ensemble are showing, and that we really don't know what's going to happen with this storm. So we're hoping that the ensemble runs are going to tighten up, but at this point, we really have no idea exactly where the storm is heading after it goes through Cuba. All right, and so we switch over to the GFS ensemble. GFS ensemble no better than the European. All right, a little bit more, a lot more members shown by the GFS than the European models, just showing that there's a lot bigger of a signal for this storm developing. That makes sense because the European model really didn't show the storm doing much on the OZ run, and then the GFS was actually showing three runs in a row of full blown major hurricanes. But you can see we still get a lot of members that take this up the East Coast. A lot of members actually making a landfall or a near landfall on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Interesting to see that actually the majority of those are the stronger members than the ones out here in the Gulf Coast. But you can see all of them, they first have to take this through Florida and then take this back offshore and re-strengthen. So a pretty wild scenario with that. But the fact that you're getting a lot of members that are actually doing that, it's pretty crazy, and that just shows that there is a real possibility of that happening. You see a lot of members just take this up through the Big Bend of Florida, not really doing much after that. That would be probably our best case scenario. And then a lot of members take this over towards the other Gulf Coast states, like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. And some of these are also some stronger members, like we saw the OZ run bring that low down to a 949 millibar low. So definitely a worst case scenario with that. But just to show you guys, I mean, even the GFS ensemble really has no idea what's going on here. We have a few members doing this, we have a few members doing this, a few members doing this. So we're just gonna have to hope that these ensemble runs tighten up. But as of right now, don't get angry at me in the comments for not knowing. But I'm just gonna tell you guys right now, I personally have no idea what's gonna happen with this storm after it goes through Cuba, and we're just gonna have to figure it out and wait and see, and hope that these ensemble runs tighten up so we can get a little bit of a better idea. All right, so we finally look at the GFS run here. This is the 12-0 run, and we're looking at just our pattern because this may actually help us figure out where exactly the storm may go. All right, so we're gonna start out with the storm kind of just make its way through Cuba. There it is, right there. It's pretty small and it's hard to see, but it's there and it's going up through Cuba. And what you want to look at on this map is pressure. These are different pressure anomalies here. So you're seeing above average high pressure out here. This is a little bit of what we call a ridge off the east coast, and then we see another ridge, another area of blocking high pressure that's up in the northwestern United States. Now, a ridge is basically just an area that's going to block any storm, any like tropical storm, to get into wherever it's over, whatever region it's over. So if you have high pressure in this region, then the storm is most likely going to be blocked away from it. All right, so high pressure systems are kind of like shields to shield tropical storms and tropical systems away from these areas. All right, so you can see we have two areas of high pressure, and they actually open up a little bit. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the members on the ensemble runs taking this up in different locations, because there's just such an open area for this storm to go that it can go anywhere pretty much. It could go there, it could go here, it could go a little bit farther out to sea. All right, but I think because this opens up, it puts a lot of the eastern United States at risk of getting hit down the line from the storm. But the reason why we're looking at this map is to give us some idea of where the storm could go, and we see what happens as we get into the fourth, which would be Sunday night into Monday. And you can see this high pressure kind of blocks the central United States from getting hit, but it kind of ends or just weakens a little bit on the back of it. All right, as we go a little bit closer up the East Coast. So now we put just the eastern seaboard at risk, and it looks like if this were to play out, that the storm would want to avoid this. So the storm would not go this way, because if it went this way, then it would get blocked by this high pressure. So if this were to play out, this would probably steer the storm in this direction, this general direction, which would put the eastern seaboard and just the East Coast at risk. And that would be bad because we have a lot of major cities out there, and we see what happens after that. And it kind of gets circled up in high pressure. The high pressure ridge builds and gets stronger over the central United States. Still a little bit weaker out there in like the mid-Atlantic up here. All right, but it's just in a little pocket of breathing room for this storm to try and strengthen with some neutral pressure. And it's trying to make its way further north because it's trying to take up these areas with the that are not around high pressure. And another reason, here's one reason why the GFS may have actually shown that crazy run with the U-turn. It's actually because the storm, I mean, this is really weird, but the storm may actually, what the GFS showed was the storm would run into this high pressure here and get turned around and then come back to Florida where there isn't high pressure. Now, that is an absolutely insane scenario, but I think that actually could be what happened, and we will take a look at the 60. And sure enough, there it is. I mean, you see it, and it wants to go back because this area of high pressure blocks it from going advancing up the East Coast. So that actually might spare our folks up there in the East Coast, and we see what happens. And on the 12Z run, it really does not show any high pressure that really wants to circle the storm and kind of just block it from advancing up the East Coast. So on the 12Z run, it actually shows a pretty good sized trough that starts to dig down through the northeast, and that's more of a bad kind of thing to see, because that could take up the storm, kind of scoop it up and bring it farther north, which would bring it up the East Coast. And we see what happens after that, and we see more high pressure regions start to go back into the region, and it tries once again to block the New England coastline and kind of the Mid-Atlantic coastline it blocks it from getting hit by this storm, and it really gets strong, and it just builds and builds, and it kind of circles in and traps the storm in a big strong area of high pressure ridging there, and it kind of just saves and spares the New England states, and we really don't see any impacts after what happens to the Carolinas after that. All right, so after that, we get this big trough that you can see digs down from Canada, and this would be a really strong trough. As a matter of fact, this is actually a really deep one. You can see just some very low pressure there, and just kind of swings by. And what's going to happen here is it's going to pick up this storm and it's going to kind of just fling it out to sea like that. All right, and that's how this kind of pattern would unfold. Now, this is subject to change. This was definitely going to change, but if this were to happen, this would spare the northeastern United States from getting hit, and that trough kind of digs through. All right, gets a little bit stronger, gets a little bit deeper, and just like that, kind of just flings the storm out to sea. And it gets pretty strong over here into just north of Maine. All right, but we could see a little bit of a potential impact on Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, but once again, we don't even know what's going to happen past Cuba, so that's a lot of whack. But just so you guys know, you don't need to pay attention to this that much as of right now. But in the future, there may be a potential for maybe an impact around Nova Scotia and Newfoundland sometime after the storm could potentially get picked up by that trough. So that's pretty much the driving pattern that the storm could be entering. All right, we have to take a look at what the models are going to say as we get later in the week, because obviously they're subject to change, and this will change. So we're going to see what kind of pattern we'll be in as we get into the late week. But that's what the current models are saying. That's what the current GFS is saying. And yeah, I mean that's about it. So finally, we're gonna go over here to just our sea surface temperatures here. These are not our anomalies. These are just how hot these sea surface temperatures are, and you can see. I mean, we're getting up to 32 degrees Celsius all across the Gulf of Mexico. It's almost like it's a ticking time bomb, and these waters have heated up, just waiting for this storm. Because all around Cuba, you're seeing sea surface temperatures getting at around 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. So if you don't know what that means, that's basically sea surface temperatures getting close to 90 degrees. And boom, you see a lot of these 31s and even those 32s. That's right around 90 degrees 90 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so absolutely incredibly warm, incredibly high sea surface temperatures, and anywhere in the Gulf, you're just seeing record-shattering sea surface temperatures. So they've heated up, and they've heated up just in time for this storm to come through. So I just want to, point this home and just make sure that all of you guys know this storm is not going to struggle with sea surface temperatures. All right, that's not going to be the problem for this storm. It's just a matter of how much wind shear can it take, because we do have some wind shear in this region. But also we just got to figure out how much of that ridge it's going to take, because it's going to struggle fighting off that ridge and fighting against it, and we're just going to have to figure this out. But man, I mean, these sea surface temperatures 29, 30, 31, 32 degrees Celsius. You're near 90 degrees sea surface temperatures. That is incredible. All right. And so for the last part of the update, we finally can take a look at our model intensity guidance, because this isn't Invest. This is Invest 97L now. And we only have about 4 or 5 members on this, but there is a model intensity guidance chart. And just because of how incredibly hard it is to forecast the storm, and how incredibly just bad the models are struggling with this, trying to figure out this storm. We only have about 5 members here, but they all take this up to Category 1 status. They even all take this up to Category 2, and some of them get pretty close to Category 3. So just to give you guys a little sneak peek at how strong this storm may end up getting, all right, we have a little bit of a better understanding of the strength of the storm. It seems pretty possible that we're going to get a Category 1, Category 2 hurricane, but it seems pretty likely that this could end up being Tropical Storm Debby. All right, so that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for coming to watch. I'll see you guys in the next video, so stay tuned. I'll continue to give you guys more updates on the storm. All right, don't be scared to be prepared. Please just don't take those model runs seriously. I mean, those are going to be a big signal for where the storm may go, how strong it may get, but do not take those seriously as if it's going to be the exact trajectory of the storm. We really don't know at this point. We're going to try and figure it out as we get later in this week. But once again, thank you for coming to watch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.